The attic was suffocating, its musty air thick with secrets. I wiped sweat from my brow, my hands trembling as I lifted the lid of an old trunk. Nestled among yellowed newspapers and faded photographs, a bundle of letters caught my eye. The handwriting was unfamiliar, delicate yet urgent. "Rachel? Are you still up there?" Dominic's voice floated up from below. I hesitated, my fingers grazing the frayed edges of the envelopes. "Just a minute," I called back, my heart racing. Quickly, I stuffed the letters into my pocket and closed the trunk. As I descended the rickety ladder, Dominic appeared at the bottom, his brow furrowed. "What were you doing up there?" he asked, a hint of suspicion in his tone. I forced a smile. "Just looking for some old baby clothes. Thought we might be able to use them for Grace." Dominic's face softened. "Oh, right. Good idea." He glanced at his watch. "The boys will be home soon. I need to head out for a bit. Can you handle dinner?" I nodded, grateful for the distraction. "Of course. Go ahead." As soon as the front door closed behind him, I rushed to the kitchen and pulled out the letters with shaking hands. The return address bore the name Sarah Harper, Dominic's late wife. The first letter was dated 5 years ago, just months before Sarah's death. I began to read, my breath catching in my throat. "Dear Lucy and Ian, I'm writing to you in desperation. Things have gotten worse, and I fear for the boys' safety. Dominic's temper is out of control, and his parents enable his behavior. Please, I need your help." The sound of the front door opening startled me. I quickly shoved the letters back into my pocket as Ethan, my 15-year-old stepson, walked into the kitchen. "Hey," he mumbled, barely making eye contact. "Hi, Ethan," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "How was school?" He shrugged, heading for the fridge. "Fine." I watched him, my mind reeling from what I'd just read. Was it possible? Had Dominic been abusive to Sarah? To the boys? "Where's Dad?" Ethan asked, breaking into my thoughts. "He had to run out for a bit," I replied. "He'll be back for dinner." Ethan nodded, then paused, studying my face. "Are you okay? You look kind of pale." I forced another smile. "I'm fine, just a little tired. Pregnancy, you know?" His eyes flickered to my swollen belly, then back to my face. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of concern in his usually guarded expression. The front door opened again, and 12-year-old Max bounded in, all energy and smiles. "Rachel, can we have pizza for dinner?" I laughed, grateful for the distraction. "Not tonight, buddy. How about spaghetti?" As I busied myself with dinner preparations, my mind raced. What other secrets did those letters hold? And what was I going to do with this information? The sound of a car in the driveway made my stomach clench. Dominic was home. I heard his parents' voices as well. Beverly and Carl must have come for dinner. "Rachel?" Beverly's shrill voice called out. "Where are you hiding?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the evening ahead. As I turned to greet them, my hand unconsciously went to my pocket, feeling the weight of Sarah's letters against my hip. "In the kitchen!" I called back, my voice steadier than I felt. Whatever these letters revealed, I knew one thing for certain. Nothing in this family would ever be the same again. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, my hands resting on my swollen belly. 6 months pregnant, and I still couldn't believe it. A mix of joy and anxiety swirled inside me, much like the baby kicking beneath my palms. "Rachel?" Max's voice called from the hallway. "Can I come in?" I opened the door to find my younger stepson, his face bright with excitement. "Look what I made in art class," he thrust a clay figurine towards me. "It's beautiful, Max," I said, admiring the misshapen but lovingly crafted sculpture. "Is it for the baby?" He nodded eagerly. "Do you think she'll like it?" "She'll love it," I assured him, ruffling his hair. Max's acceptance had been a balm to my soul these past months, a stark contrast to Ethan's cold shoulder. As if summoned by my thoughts, Ethan appeared in the doorway, his face a mask of indifference. "Dad wants to know if dinner's ready," I sighed, glancing at my watch. "I'll be down in a minute. Can you set the table, please?" Ethan shrugged and turned away without a word. Max gave me an apologetic look before scampering after his brother. Downstairs, I found Dominic in his study, buried in paperwork. "Honey," I said, knocking gently on the open door. "Dinner's almost ready." He looked up, distracted. "Oh, right. I'll be there in a sec." I hesitated, then plunged ahead. I was thinking, maybe we could tell the boys about the baby tonight? Dominic's brow furrowed. "Are you sure that's a good idea? Ethan's still adjusting to everything." "It's been over a year, Dominic," I said, frustration creeping into my voice. And I'm showing. We can't keep it a secret much longer. He sighed, rubbing his temples. Fine, we'll tell them after dinner. The meal was a tense affair, with Ethan pushing food around his plate and Max trying to fill the silence with chatter about school. As we cleared the dishes, Dominic cleared his throat. Boys, Rachel and I have some news, he began. Ethan's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. Max looked between us, curiosity written across his face. We're going to have a baby, I said, my hand instinctively moving to my belly. You're going to have a little sister. Max's face lit up. Really? That's awesome. He jumped up to hug me, nearly knocking me off balance. Ethan, however, remained stone-faced. Congratulations, he said flatly, pushing back from the table. May I be excused? Ethan, wait, Dominic called, but the boy was already halfway up the stairs. I felt tears pricking at my eyes. I'll go talk to him, I said, but Dominic shook his head. Let him cool off. I'll handle it later. But later never seemed to come with Dominic. As the weeks passed, the tension in the house grew thicker. Ethan retreated further into himself, while Max's excitement about the baby only seemed to widen the rift between the brothers. One afternoon I found myself alone in the house, the weight of Sarah's letters heavy in my mind. I hadn't dared read more since that first day, but now, with silence pressing in around me, I couldn't resist. I retrieved the bundle from its hiding place and began to read. Sarah's words painted a picture of a family in crisis. Dominic's temper, his parents' interference, her growing fear for her children's well-being. Tears streamed down my face as I read the final letter, dated just days before Sarah's death. If anything happens to me, she wrote, please, Lucy and Ian, take care of my boys. Don't let them forget that they're loved. The sound of the front door slamming jolted me back to reality. I quickly hid the letters as Ethan stormed into the kitchen. Ethan? I called, my voice shaky. Is everything okay? He whirled to face me, his eyes blazing with a mix of anger and pain I'd never seen before. Why do you care? He spat. You're not my mother. You're just the woman who's trying to replace her. His words hit me like a physical blow. As he stormed upstairs, I sank into a chair, one hand on my belly, the other clutching Sarah's letters. In that moment, I realized that the family I'd thought I was joining was built on a foundation of secrets and pain, and I was caught right in the middle of it all. The doorbell chimed, and my heart sank. Beverly and Carl were early as usual. I smoothed my dress over my 8-month belly and plastered on a smile. Rachel, darling! Beverly's saccharine voice grated on my nerves as she swept into the house. My, you're looking robust. I bit back a retort. Hello, Beverly. Carl, please, come in. Carl grunted, eyeing me critically. Where's Dominic? Still at work, I replied, leading them to the living room. He should be home soon. Beverly sked. Working so late with a baby on the way? I hope you're not putting too much pressure on him, Rachel. I clenched my jaw. Dominic makes his own choices. Of course he does, Beverly said, her tone dripping with condescension. Now, where are my grandsons? As if on cue, Max bounded down the stairs. Grandma! Grandpa! He hugged them both, then turned to me. Rachel, can I show them the nursery? Before I could answer, Beverly interjected. Oh, you've been helping with the nursery? How sweet. I'm sure Rachel appreciates any help she can get, being so inexperienced. I saw Max's face fall slightly. Actually, I said, forcing my voice to remain calm, Max has been a huge help. He's got quite an eye for design. Beverly's lips thinned. Well, isn't that lovely? Carl, why don't you go with Max? I'd like to have a little chat with Rachel. My stomach clenched as Carl and Max headed upstairs. Beverly turned to me, her eyes cold. Rachel, dear, we need to discuss your influence on this family. I steeled myself. What do you mean, Beverly? Well, she began, her voice sickly sweet, we've noticed some changes since you arrived. Ethan's become so withdrawn, and now Max is playing interior decorator. It's just not natural. Not natural? I echoed, disbelief coloring my tone. Dominic tells us you're encouraging the boys to express themselves, she continued. That's not how we raised Dominic. Men in this family are strong, not emotional. I felt my temper rising. And look how well that turned out. I snapped before I could stop myself. Beverly's eyes widened. I beg your pardon? The front door opened, saving me from having to respond. Dominic walked in, looking tired. Mom, what are you doing here? He asked, confusion evident in his voice. Beverly's demeanor changed instantly. Oh, honey, we just came to check on you all. We're worried about the stress you're under. Dominic's brow furrowed. What stress? Beverly glanced pointedly at my belly. Well, with the baby coming and Rachel clearly struggling to manage the household. I'm not struggling, I interjected, but Dominic was already nodding. It has been tough, he admitted, but we're managing. I stared at him, hurt and anger warring inside me. Dominic, can I speak with you in the kitchen? Once alone, I rounded on him. Why didn't you tell me your parents were coming? He shrugged. I forgot. What's the big deal? The big deal, I hissed, is that your mother just spent the last 10 minutes criticizing everything about our life. Dominic sighed. Rachel, you're overreacting. That's just how Mom is. And you just let her talk to me like that? I felt tears pricking at my eyes. Look, he said, his voice taking on an edge I'd never heard before. My parents are important to me. If you can't handle them, maybe you need to try harder. I stepped back, shocked. Try harder? Dominic, I've been trying since the day I moved in. But your parents hate me. Ethan can barely look at me, and you don't even see what's happening. What's happening, he growled, is that you're turning my family against me. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and final. I opened my mouth to respond, but a sharp pain in my abdomen made me gasp instead. Dominic's anger morphed into concern. Rachel? What's wrong? I clutched my belly, panic rising. I think the baby's coming. As Dominic rushed to call the hospital, I leaned against the counter, breathing heavily. Through the haze of pain, one thought crystallized in my mind. Something had to change, and soon. For my sake, for the boy's sake, and now, for my daughter's sake, too. The shrill cry of Grace pierced the early morning silence, jolting me awake. I stumbled out of bed, exhaustion weighing heavily on my bones. It had been 3 months since her dramatic arrival, and I felt like I hadn't slept since. As I cradled Grace, trying to soothe her, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. Dark circles under my eyes, hair a mess, and clothes that hadn't been changed in days. I barely recognized myself. Rachel? Dominic's voice called from downstairs. My parents are here. Can you come down? I froze, panic rising in my chest. Beverly and Carl were here? Now? I looked down at Grace, finally quiet, then back at my disheveled reflection. There was no time to make myself presentable. Descending the stairs, I could hear Beverly's voice, sharp and critical. Really, Dominic, the house is a mess. I thought Rachel was supposed to be taking care of things. I stepped into the living room, Grace in my arms. Good morning, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Beverly's eyes widened as she took in my appearance. Oh my, she said, her tone dripping with disdain. Rachel, dear, you look, well, I suppose new motherhood isn't easy for everyone. I felt my cheeks burn with shame and anger. I'm doing my best, I said through gritted teeth. Carl grunted. Doesn't look like much of a best to me. I looked to Dominic, silently pleading for support, but he avoided my gaze. Mom, Dad, why don't we go out for breakfast? He suggested. Give Rachel some time to get things in order. The implications stung. As they left, I sank onto the couch, tears threatening to spill over. Grace began to fuss again, and I felt utterly overwhelmed. Suddenly, Ethan appeared in the doorway. His eyes darted between me and the baby, a mix of concern and uncertainty on his face. Are you okay? He asked hesitantly. I tried to smile, but it felt more like a grimace. I'm fine, Ethan, just tired. He shifted uncomfortably. I could hold her for a bit, if you want to shower or something. His offer caught me off guard. You'd do that? Ethan shrugged. Yeah, I guess. I mean, she is my sister. Gratitude washed over me as I carefully transferred Grace to Ethan's arms. As I headed upstairs, I heard him talking softly to her, and for a moment, hope flickered in my chest. But reality came crashing back when I returned to find Dominic and his parents had returned. Beverly was holding Grace, cooing at her while shooting pointed looks in my direction. There you are, Rachel, she said. We were just discussing how you might need some help. Perhaps a nanny? I bristled. We don't need a nanny. I can take care of my own child. Beverly's smile was cold. Of course, dear, but with the house in such a state and you looking so worn out, we're just concerned. We? I looked at Dominic, who shifted uncomfortably. Rachel, he began, his tone placating, maybe Mom has a point. You have been struggling lately. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Struggling, Dominic, I've been doing everything, taking care of Grace, the boys, the house, while you... While I what? Dominic's voice took on a dangerous edge. While I worked to support this family, the room fell silent, tension thick in the air. Even Beverly looked taken aback by Dominic's tone. In that moment, something inside me snapped. I thought of Sarah's letters hidden away. I thought of Ethan's small act of kindness, and I thought of my daughter who deserved better than this toxic environment. "You know what?" I said, my voice low and steady. "You're right. I do need help, but not from a nanny, and certainly not from you." I turned to Ethan, who was watching the scene unfold with wide eyes. "Ethan, can you take Grace upstairs, please?" As Ethan left with the baby, I faced Dominic and his parents. "This ends now," I declared. "I'm done being the scapegoat for this family's problems. Either things change, or I'm leaving, and I'm taking my daughter with me." The shock on their faces would have been satisfying if I wasn't trembling inside. But as I stood there, chin held high, I knew I had reached a turning point. Whatever came next, I was ready to fight for myself and my children. All of them. The fluorescent lights of the office buzzed overhead, matching the constant thrum of anxiety in my chest. I stared at the computer screen, the words blurring before my eyes. My head pounded, a dull ache that had become my constant companion. "Rachel?" My colleague Sarah peered over the cubicle wall. "Are you okay? You look pale." I forced a smile. "I'm fine, just a bit tired. Grace had a rough night." Sarah's brow furrowed with concern. "You've been just tired for weeks now. Maybe you should see a doctor?" Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. A text from Dominic. "Mom and Dad coming for dinner. Don't forget to pick up Grace from daycare." My stomach churned. Another evening of criticism and tension. I closed my eyes, trying to steady my breathing. "Rachel?" Sarah's voice seemed distant. "Rachel, you're shaking." I opened my eyes to find the room spinning. Suddenly, the floor rushed up to meet me. I came to on a couch in the break room, surrounded by concerned faces. Our HR manager, Linda, knelt beside me. "Rachel, we've called an ambulance. You fainted," she explained gently. Panic surged through me. "No, I can't go to the hospital. I have to pick up Grace and dinner." "Your health comes first," Linda insisted. "We've contacted your husband. He's on his way to the hospital." The next few hours passed in a blur of tests and questions. When the doctor finally entered my room, his expression was grave. "Mrs. Harper, your blood pressure is dangerously high. You're showing signs of severe stress and exhaustion. If you don't make some significant changes, you're at risk for serious complications." I nodded numbly, barely registering his words. All I could think about was Grace and the boys and the mountain of tasks waiting for me at home. The door burst open, and Dominic rushed in, followed closely by Beverly and Carl. My heart sank at the sight of them. "Rachel, what happened?" Dominic demanded. "Why didn't you tell me you were sick?" Before I could answer, Beverly chimed in. "I knew she couldn't handle it all." "Dominic, this is what happens when you let a career woman try to run a household." Anger flared within me, cutting through the fog of exhaustion. "Excuse me?" Carl grunted. "Face it, girl. You bit off more than you could chew. It's time to admit you need help." I looked to Dominic, silently pleading for support, but he avoided my gaze. "Maybe they're right, Rachel. You're clearly overwhelmed." Something inside me snapped. "Overwhelmed? Of course I'm overwhelmed. I'm working full-time, taking care of an infant and 2 teenagers, managing a household, and dealing with constant criticism from your parents. And where have you been, Dominic? Where's your support?" The room fell silent. Dominic's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "That's not fair, Rachel. I work hard to provide for this family." "And I don't?" I shot back. "When was the last time you got up for a 3 a.m. feeding, or helped with homework, or stood up to your parents when they belittle me?" Beverly gasped. "How dare you speak to him like that? After everything we've done for you." "Enough!" I shouted, surprising even myself. "I'm done. I'm done trying to please everyone while sacrificing my own health and happiness." I turned to Dominic, my voice shaking but resolute. "Things need to change, Dominic. Either we get counseling and you start setting boundaries with your parents, or what?" Dominic's voice was dangerously low. I took a deep breath, the weight of my next words hanging in the air. "Or I'm leaving, and I'm taking Grace with me." The stunned silence that followed was broken only by the steady beep of the heart monitor. In that moment, staring into Dominic's shocked face, I knew there was no going back. Whatever came next, I had to prioritize my health and my children's well-being. The time for compromise was over. Now, it was time to fight. I stood in the kitchen, mechanically stirring a pot of soup, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts. The house was eerily quiet. Dominic had taken Grace to his parents for the day, a thinly veiled attempt to give me a break after my hospital scare. But the silence only amplified my inner turmoil. A soft knock on the doorframe startled me. I turned to see Ethan hovering uncertainly in the doorway. "Rachel?" His voice was hesitant. "Can we talk?" I nodded, surprised. "Of course. Come in." Ethan sat at the kitchen table, fidgeting with a folded piece of paper. I found something in Dad's study." My heart raced as he unfolded the paper. It was a letter, the handwriting achingly familiar, Sarah's handwriting. "It's from my mom," Ethan said, his voice cracking. "She wrote it right before she died. I think you should read it." With trembling hands, I took the letter. As I read, Sarah's words burned into my mind. "Dominic, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I can't take it anymore. The anger, the control, the fear. I'm leaving, and I'm taking the boys with me. Your parents have poisoned our family for too long. I won't let them do to our children what they did to you. I'm sorry I couldn't be stronger. Please find help, break the cycle, for our boys' sake." I looked up at Ethan, tears blurring my vision. "Oh, Ethan, I'm so sorry. She never got to leave. The accident, it wasn't an accident, was it?" The weight of this revelation crashed over me. Suddenly everything, Dominic's temper, his parents' interference, the boys' pain, clicked into horrifying focus. "Ethan," I said, my voice shaking, "I need you to listen to me. What's happening in this family isn't right. It wasn't right for your mother, and it's not right for us now." Ethan nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I know, I've known for a while. I didn't know what to do." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I was about to say. "I'm going to leave your father, and I want to take you, Max, and Grace with me." Ethan's eyes widened. "You do that? Even for us?" "Of course," I said, reaching out to squeeze his hand. "You're my family too, Ethan. All of you." Just then we heard the front door open. Dominic's voice called out, "Rachel, we're home." Panic flashed across Ethan's face. I quickly folded the letter and slipped it into my pocket. "It's okay," I whispered. "We'll figure this out." Dominic appeared in the doorway, Grace in his arms. His eyes narrowed as he took in the scene before him. "What's going on here?" I stood up, my heart pounding but my resolve firm. "Dominic, we need to talk about everything." His face darkened. "Everything? What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "that I know about Sarah, about what really happened, and I'm not going to let history repeat itself." The color drained from Dominic's face. He set Grace down, his movements suddenly jerky and aggressive. "You don't know anything," he snarled. "I know enough," I shot back, "and I'm done pretending. This ends now, Dominic, for all our sakes." Ethan stood up, moving to stand beside me. "She's right, Dad. We can't keep living like this." Dominic's eyes darted between us, a cornered animal. "You're turning my own son against me?" he growled, taking a step forward. I instinctively pushed Ethan behind me, shielding him. "No, Dominic, you did that all on your own." As Dominic advanced, rage contorting his features, I realized with crystal clarity that this was the moment everything would change. There was no going back now. Whatever came next, I had to be ready to fight. Not just for myself, but for all 4 children who were counting on me. With one hand reaching for Grace and the other holding Ethan's arm, I braced myself for the storm that was about to break. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. "I want a divorce, Dominic." His face contorted with rage, a vein pulsing in his forehead. "You what?" I stood my ground, heart racing but voice steady. "You heard me. I'm leaving, and I'm taking the children with me." Dominic's laugh was cold, mirthless. "You think you can just walk away? Take my kids?" "Our kids," I corrected. "And yes, I can. I will." His eyes darted to Ethan, who stood beside me, then to Max, who had appeared in the doorway, drawn by the commotion. "Boys," Dominic said, his voice dangerously calm, "go to your rooms, now." Neither moved. Max spoke up, his voice trembling but determined. "No, Dad. We're staying with Rachel." Dominic's facade cracked. "What did you say to them?" He snarled at me. "How dare you turn my own children against me?" "We made our own choice," Ethan said. "We know what you did to Mom, what you've been doing to all of us." The color drained from Dominic's face. "You don't know anything," he hissed. "We know enough," I said, pulling Sarah's letter from my pocket. "And so will the police if you try to stop us." Dominic lunged forward, but Ethan stepped between us. "Don't touch her," he warned. For a moment, I saw a flicker of shock in Dominic's eyes, as if truly seeing his son for the first time. Then his expression hardened. "Fine," he spat. "Leave, but don't think this is over." As we hurried to pack essentials, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Lucy Miller. We need to talk." My heart skipped a beat. Ethan and Max's maternal grandparents, the ones Dominic had kept away for years. I quickly replied, arranging to meet them. Hours later, we sat in a quiet cafe, the boys reuniting tearfully with their grandparents. Lucy clutched my hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "We've been trying to reach them for so long." Ian's face was grim. "We always suspected something was wrong, but Dominic kept us away, said we were a bad influence." "He was the bad influence," Max said bitterly. "Him and his parents." A chill ran down my spine. "His parents," I repeated. "Oh God, Beverly and Carl, they'll be furious when they find out." As if on cue, my phone exploded with notifications. Missed calls from Beverly, threatening texts from Carl, and a voicemail from Dominic that made my blood run cold. "You think you've won?" His voice slurred, clearly drunk. "This isn't over. I'll take everything from you. The kids, the house, everything. You'll regret the day you crossed me, Rachel." I looked up at the concerned faces around me. "We need to go," I said urgently. "It's not safe here anymore." Lucy squeezed my hand. "Come stay with us. We have plenty of room and Dominic doesn't know where we live." As we drove to Lucy and Ian's house, my mind raced. How had it come to this? Running from the man I once loved with 4 children depending on me? Ethan's voice broke into my thoughts. "Rachel, are we going to be okay?" I met his eyes in the rearview mirror, seeing the fear and hope battling there. I thought of Sarah's letter, of the years of abuse and manipulation, of the strength it took to break free. "Yes," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "We're going to be okay. It won't be easy, but we're together now, and we're going to fight for the life we deserve." As we pulled up to Lucy and Ian's house, I saw Beverly and Carl's car parked across the street. My heart plummeted. How had they found us so quickly? "Stay in the car?" I told the children, my voice tight with fear. "Lock the doors. I'll handle this." As I stepped out to face my in-laws, I knew this was it, the moment that would define our future. Everything was at stake, and I had to be ready for whatever came next. I stood on the porch, my heart pounding as Beverly and Carl approached. Behind me, I could hear Lucy and Ian ushering the children inside. "Where do you think you're going with our grandchildren?" Beverly's shrill voice cut through the air. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "They're safe, Beverly. That's all that matters." Carl's face reddened. "You have no right to take them, Dominic." "Dominic lost that right," I interrupted, my voice steady. "And so did you." Just then, a car screeched to a halt behind them. Dominic stumbled out, his eyes wild with rage. "You," he snarled, pointing at me. "You've ruined everything." As he lurched towards me, Ethan burst out of the house, placing himself between us. "Stop right there, Dad," he warned. Dominic froze, shock momentarily replacing anger. "Ethan, what are you doing?" "Protecting my family," Ethan replied, his voice trembling but resolute. "The way you never did." Beverly gasped. "How dare you speak to your father that way?" "No," I said, stepping forward. "How dare you all treat these children like possessions instead of people? How dare you continue the cycle of abuse that nearly destroyed Sarah?" Carl's face paled. "What are you talking about?" I pulled out Sarah's letter, my hands shaking. "I know everything. About Sarah's plan to leave, about the accident that wasn't an accident, and so do the police." As if on cue, sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Dominic's face contorted with fury and fear. "You bitch," he spat. "You'll pay for this." He lunged forward, but Ethan was quicker. In a move that spoke of years of pent-up anger, he shoved his father back. Dominic stumbled, falling hard on the pavement. As the police cars pulled up, everything seemed to move in slow motion. Officers swarmed around us, separating Dominic and his parents from the rest of us. I watched as they were handcuffed and read their rights, feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. Max appeared at my side, slipping his hand into mine. "Is it over?" he asked, his voice small. I squeezed his hand. "Yes, sweetheart, it's over." Hours later, after statements had been given and plans set in motion, we sat in Lucy and Ian's living room. Grace slept peacefully in my arms, while Ethan and Max leaned against me on either side. "What happens now?" Ethan asked, his voice heavy with exhaustion. I looked around at the faces of our newfound family, Lucy and Ian beaming with joy at being reunited with their grandsons, the boys finally free from the weight of secrets and fear, and little Grace innocent and unaware of the seismic shift in our world. "Now," I said, my voice thick with emotion, "we heal, we build a new life, one filled with love and honesty and support." Lucy reached out, squeezing my hand. "You're not alone in this, Rachel. We're all here for you and the children." I felt tears welling up, but for the first time in years they were tears of relief and hope. "Thank you," I whispered. "All of you, for being brave, for standing up for what's right." As the evening wore on, plans were made. Lucy and Ian offered us a place to stay until we could get back on our feet. We talked about therapy, about legal proceedings, about rebuilding our lives. Later that night, as I tucked the children into bed, Ethan caught my hand. "Rachel," he said softly, "I'm sorry I was so hard on you before. You saved us, just like Mom tried to do." I felt my heart swell with love and pride. "Oh, Ethan," I said, pulling him into a hug, "you saved us too. We all did together." As I closed their bedroom door, I paused in the hallway, overwhelmed by the events of the day. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years I felt hope blooming in my chest. We had broken free from the cycle of abuse and silence. We had chosen love over fear, truth over lies, and in doing so, we had found not just safety, but a true family, one built on trust, respect, and unconditional love. As I settled into bed, exhausted but at peace, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. Our journey of healing had only just begun, but we were finally on the right path, and that, I realized, was the greatest victory of all.